What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting, very beautiful day in the garden today. I could not be happier with the weather. Slight breeze, probably 70 degrees or so. It is just a chef's kiss of a day. Love it here in Michigan right now. It is awesome. Hopefully you guys are having great weather wherever you're at. We're out in the garden today because we are direct sowing seed. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk about all the varieties you can be direct sowing in April. There's a lot of them, so let's get started. All right, so before we get started here, I want to show you a quick little tool I'm using to direct sow. This has absolutely changed my life when it comes to direct sowing seed, and that is known as a crossboard. A lot of my friends over in the UK have asked me for years why I'm not using a crossboard, because all of their allotments are basically raised bed style gardens, and it essentially allows them to span the length of the raised bed, or the width of the raised bed, with a board, so that rather than walk all the way around, they can just have a board that's wide enough that they can kneel, sit, or even walk across without having to either compact the soil or walk all the way around the raised bed. So you're going to see me using this. I absolutely love it. If you have raised beds, it's by far the best tool that I have in the garden. It saves a lot of time, especially when we're sowing a lot of seed. So now that I've talked about this tool that a lot of people usually ask me about, it's just a 2x4 literally, or 2x6, so don't get too scientific with it. We're going to be direct sowing seed. Now, the seeds we're going to be sowing are broken down into a few different categories. We have our big leafy green category, we have our root vegetable category, and then we have our etc. category. These are crops that do not fall into leafy greens or root crops, and those are kind of the three main categories of seeds that we're going to be direct sowing in April. All right, so the first crop that we're going to be direct sowing in April is lettuce. Lettuce is kind of the quintessential leafy green that everyone loves to grow in spring, and a lot of people don't sow it early enough. Lettuce does not like warm temperatures, so we want to start it early. We're going to be direct sowing our lettuce in what we call high intensity spacing. That's basically where we put a seed about every ½ inch, so that as the lettuce grows up, it's nice and dense. It's going to do a few things. One, it's going to protect the soil from the sun, so it keeps it cooler. The cooler the soil, the longer it's going to grow. It's also going to protect the soil from things like evaporation. Lettuce likes damper soil, and that's why planting it early in spring when you get a lot of rain usually is a good thing, because lettuce does fairly well. And then finally, it's also going to suppress weeds. When it shades out the soil, there's going to be less sunlight and stuff for weeds to actually grow. So you're going to end up actually helping yourself in the long run. And then aside from all of those benefits, you're going to be just getting more of a harvest. We're going to be growing probably 3 or 4 times as much lettuce in the same amount of space. And we're basically going to be growing them up for leaves, even if it's a heading variety, like this is tango leaf lettuce, but you could grow iceberg, which is a head lettuce, or romaine lettuce, which is a head lettuce. We're gonna be growing them densely and just harvesting them for its leaves in a method called cut and come again. And so lettuce is one you wanna grow early, grow it often. You could even succession sow it about every 2 weeks and be just fine. But getting it in the ground when the nighttime temperatures are hovering just above freezing and the daytime temperatures are still in kind of mid to upper 50s is perfect weather for growing lettuce. All right, the next leafy green we're going to be direct sowing is spinach. Now, spinach is one that cannot tolerate warm weather at all, and so you want to get it in the ground early. In fact, you could have direct sown spinach as early as probably mid-March if the weather would have allowed. For us, it was still snowing and way too cold for spinach, but if the weather would have allowed, we could have technically planted it even in mid-March and been just fine. That's because spinach, if it's exposed to anything above 70 degrees for longer than a couple days at a time, it'll just go to seed. And that's where it gets really bitter. It starts to get smaller and stringy, and a lot of people kind of just say, compost it at that point. So it's not really worth eating once it starts to go to seed. So start it early and start it often, and you're gonna really appreciate that. Now the next crop, very much like spinach that we're gonna grow, is we're gonna be growing arugula. Now arugula also does not like warm temperatures. We wanna get it in the ground when it's cool. We want to get it in the ground. Now you could plant this as well earlier than lettuce. You could plant this even when you still have nighttime temperatures that are dipping down below freezing. That's fine. They're going to survive just fine. As long as they're up and growing, they can survive. Spinach and arugula have built-in antifreeze. Not really antifreeze, but it's basically where the plant just protects itself from freezing weather. And arugula can do that no problem as well. But you don't want to get weather up into the 70s. If it's up in the 70s, simply wait until the fall to plant arugula, because it's not going to do very well. It's going to get very peppery, very spicy, and a lot of people don't like it when it gets hot and peppery. So we like to grow arugula early, and so we'll direct sow it in April. Now the next crop that you can be growing, we don't have here today, is some mustard greens. Mustard greens, much like your arugula and your spinach, it will get hot, it will go to seed very fast, and so sowing it early is important. So we're gonna be direct sowing some mustard greens as well, not today, but probably tomorrow, and we're gonna be direct sowing some mustard greens as well, because if those nighttime temperatures are just above freezing and the daytime temperatures aren't 55, 60 degrees or a little bit warmer than that, they're gonna be fine. And so we're gonna get our mustard greens as well planted, and then once those are all sown, we're probably gonna follow up in another week and direct sow another succession. That way we're not getting all of our harvest all at once. We're gonna be getting kind of a more prolonged harvest so that we have more to harvest and it's not just a huge overabundance. All right, the next crop we're gonna be direct sowing is Radicchio. Now, Radicchio, I know you're probably thinking is, yuck, bitter, yuck. Don't plant that, it's gross. Just throw it right in the compost pile. Well, if you think that, it's probably because you're planting it at the wrong time of the year. Radicchio is, and absolutely can be, a very bitter leafy green. But that's only if it's allowed to grow too late into the season or if you plant it too late in the season. By planting Radicchio early, what you're going to be growing it for are its baby leaves. If you've ever had a box of the spring greens, those spring greens have Radicchio in them, and you probably never have said, yuck, it's so bitter and so gross. And that's because when they harvest those baby greens of Radicchio, they harvest it very young when it's still sweet and not bitter. And so we're going to be growing Radicchio, and then we're also going to be growing Swiss chard. That's kind of one of the final kind of leafy green crops we're going to be growing direct sown here in April. And when it comes to Swiss chard is one that we grow not only as a summertime crop, as a fall crop, but we also grow it in the spring as well. And that's because it's a very versatile crop. It can handle super cold weather, it can handle the heat of summer, and it can also handle fall weather. So it's one that we kind of consider an all seasons leafy green crop. But basically, the sooner we can get it in the garden, the sooner it's going to start growing and the sooner we can start harvesting it. Now you'll probably notice I densely sowed my Swiss chard. This is not something that normally I would do. But for a spring harvest, we're going to be growing it as basically Swiss chard microgreens. And essentially it's going to be growing up, and we're going to be harvesting it just like we do our cut and come again lettuce. Very much the same method. So you can either densely sow it and harvest it for baby greens, or you can plant each one out, space each plant out about 3 to 4 inches, and then you're actually going to have fully mature plants you can harvest from. Whatever you like to do is totally up to you. All right, the next grouping of crops we're going to be direct sowing in April are your root crops. Now, root crops like radishes, you want to get these started early because they don't like hot weather at all. They're definitely going to go to seed if they're exposed to anything warmer than 70 degrees, just like your spinach and mustard greens and stuff like that. You definitely want to sow them early so you get a nice harvest. Then we're also going to be growing things like beets. Now, beets, you can sow them now as well as every 2 weeks through about the month of June. You're going to be getting a harvest continually so that you're not getting everything all at once. Then we're going to take a small little break from sowing beets until we get fall weather, and we're going to sow them in the fall as well. And so beets are ones that can tolerate some warmer weather. We're going to start them early so that we just have more of a season to grow them. Then we also have some carrots. Carrots are a crop much like beets. If we can sow them early, they're going to benefit from the cool, damp soil. They're going to have better germination rates. They're going to grow a little bit better. And we're going to direct sow them about every 2 weeks until about the start of June. Then we're going to stop. We're going to take a break until fall weather comes again. So the sooner we can plant them, the more of them we're just going to get during a growing season. And then we also have parsnips. Parsnips are a crop that you have to grow now just because of the fact they take so long to germinate. They take so long to get growing. And we're talking like from germination all the way to maturity is like 120 to 130 days. And so that means get them in the ground now if you want to get a harvest. Now, not represented here are other root crops like rutabagas, turnips. There's also other root crops like onions. Now we sow our onion seeds in our greenhouse. We take our onion starts and transplant those out. We'll be doing that very soon. But assuming you don't have a greenhouse or a grow room, you can absolutely take your onion seeds and sow them directly in the soil, and they'll be just fine. The final crop that is kind of a root crop that you can be sowing is the elephant in the room, and that's potatoes. Now, we don't have our potatoes ready to plant just yet, but assuming you're ahead of the game and you've got your seed potatoes ready to put in the ground, you can also put those right in the ground as well. And so those are all of the root crops you can be direct sowing in April. So do you want to know a crop that we're not direct sowing in April? Corn. The reason why we're not growing corn is because we never grow corn, because it takes a ton of space to have good production. You need to grow like almost 100 to 200 square feet of corn in order to have good cross-pollination and to have good production. And so because it's cheaper just to buy it from a local farmer, I'd much rather do that. And I can do that with the help of today's sponsor, Farmish. Farmish is an app that connects both buyers and sellers of produce that's grown locally. And so if I'm someone that's growing corn on a large scale and I want to find buyers, I can throw my corn up on the Farmish app and find buyers. Or if you're like me and you just want to buy some corn, you can go onto the app and find people in your area growing corn. I love Farmish because of the fact that it's a global app, but it has a local focus. And here on the MIgardener channel, we are all about local. Supporting local farmers and eating local produce gives you not only the best produce, but it allows you to have the highest quality produce for your family and to support the local economy, which is awesome. So if you want to learn more about today's sponsor, Farmish, I highly recommend going over to getfarmish.com/MIgardener, downloading the app and checking it out. Thanks for sponsoring today's episode, Farmish, and back to the episode. All right, so the final grouping of crops you can be planting in April are your etc. crops. These are crops that don't really fall into a set category. They're just all kind of random. So I have things like peas. I'm gonna be direct sowing my peas because they do not like warm weather, and the earlier you plant them, the more you're going to harvest. We're also gonna be planting things like herbs, right? Cilantro is a crop that does not like warm weather. So we don't have it right now, but we're gonna be planting that in about a week or so, direct sown in the ground. Still be April by that time, so we're gonna get cilantro in the ground as well. A lot of people kind of think that cilantro is a summertime crop because they like salsa in the summer, and well, if you like salsa in the summer and it's got cilantro in it, well, it must be a summertime crop. It's not a summertime crop, it's a springtime crop. So get your cilantro started early, you will thank me later for it. Then there's also crops that just take a really long time, like your celery, right? Celery, direct sow it in the ground now. It takes about 110 days to get growing, so you want to get it started in the ground now. But those are all the crops that I've got for you today for today's episode on crops you can be direct sowing in April. There's a ton more, obviously. There's probably a list of 1,000 plants long, but we don't have that much time for today's episode. So this will get you started with a really good list of stuff that you can be starting. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you guys later. All right, grow bigger. Take care. Bye.